The final stand, the bridge of the Covenant's shield trembled as another plasma barrage struck the failing energy barriers. Commander Thalen gripped the edge of his command station, his silver feathers pressed flat against his skull in a gesture of barely controlled fear. Around him, the crew of the Coalition flagship worked with desperate efficiency, their voices tight with the knowledge that death was closing in. The holographic, tactical display told a story of impending doom. 270 Coalition warships formed a defensive sphere around the refugee convoy, protecting 17 massive transport vessels carrying 4 million civilians. Arrayed against them, the Skrull Dominion had deployed nearly 20,000 combat vessels, their crystalline hulls glowing with internal energy as they tightened their encirclement. Captain Rix stood near the weapons station, her scaled hands clenched into fists. The Corvani warrior had fought in dozens of battles over her 30-year military career, but nothing had prepared her for this war. The Skrull had been sweeping across the outer reaches for 5 years, consuming worlds and enslaving populations. Every species in the Coalition had lost territory. Every fleet had suffered catastrophic losses. Shield integrity at 18%, reported Lieutenant Kess from the defense console. The young officer's antennae drooped with exhaustion. We've lost 43 ships in the last hour. Current projections show complete defensive collapse in 90 minutes. Thalen's secondary eyelids flickered across his vision. 90 minutes. The refugee ships needed at least 6 hours to reach the jump point that would carry them to safety. There was no miracle coming. No reinforcements within range. The nearest Coalition battle group was 4 days away, and even if they could somehow arrive instantly, it would only delay the inevitable. All ships maintain formation, Thalen commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet communication network. Every minute we hold is another minute those civilians have to live. Make every shot count. Dr. Myra looked up from the science station, her compound eyes reflecting the red warning lights that bathed the bridge. The Chitauri researcher had been trying to find any tactical advantage, any weakness in the Skrull formation. But her analysis showed nothing but mathematical certainty of their defeat. Commander, I have to recommend we consider evacuation protocols, Mira said quietly, her mandibles clicking with distress. If we can transfer essential personnel to the refugee ships before. No. Thalen's response was immediate and firm. We hold this line. If we abandon our posts, those transports become targets. We stay until they're safe or until we can't fight anymore. The Skrull pressed their advantage, their ships moving with the coordinated precision of a predatory swarm. Their weapons technology was terrifying in its efficiency. Plasma cannons that could melt through Coalition armor in seconds. Gravity lances that crushed ships like empty shells. Nanite warheads that ate through hulls from the inside out. Another Coalition destroyer exploded on the tactical display, its name already added to the long list of losses. The crew had been 300 souls, now reduced to expanding debris and cooling corpses. Thalen knew many of them personally. He had attended their ceremonies, celebrated their promotions, mourned their losses. Sir, communications is picking up something unusual, Lieutenant Venn called out from his station. The Aquarian's gills flared with confusion as he adjusted his equipment. We're receiving a response to our distress signal. Thalen felt his heart skip. Reinforcements? Where from? I don't know, sir. The language database is translating now. Venn's webbed fingers moved across his console. The message reads, Terran Expeditionary Force responding to distress call. Stand by for arrival. Hold your position. Silence fell across the bridge. Rix turned from the weapons station, her reptilian features creasing with confusion. Terran? That's not a Coalition designation. Myra was already searching the Galactic database, her multiple limbs working several terminals simultaneously. I found it. Earth. listed as a protected world under First Contact Protocols. Pre-space flight civilization. Last survey was conducted 97 years ago. They had achieved basic radio communication, but showed no signs of faster-than-light capability. Then how are they responding to our call? Thalen demanded. How are they coming here? Before anyone could answer, the tactical display lit up with new data. Space itself was doing something wrong several thousand kilometers ahead of the coalition formation. It was not the familiar distortion of hyperspace gates or the energy signature of warp drives. Reality was simply tearing open, as though someone had cut holes in the fabric of the universe. Through those impossible rifts came ships. 180 vessels emerged in perfect formation, arranged in precise geometric patterns that spoke of military discipline and tactical purpose. The dimensional tiers sealed behind them with a flash of exotic energy that made every sensor on the bridge scream warnings about physics violations. Thalen stared at the new arrivals, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The human ships were unlike anything in the Coalition database. Where most species designed vessels with elegant curves and smooth lines, these ships looked aggressive. Angular hulls dominated by sharp edges and weapon hardpoints. Their surfaces were matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They looked like predators emerging from deep water. Analysis, Thalen ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Myra's compound eyes reflected the tactical data streaming across her screens. Sir, those power signatures are impossible. Their reactors are generating energy levels that should require facilities 10 times that size. Their engine output suggests acceleration capability of at least 15 standard gravities. And their weapons? She trailed off, mandibles clicking rapidly. Commander, I can't even classify half of what I'm reading. These systems don't match any known technology. Captain Rix moved to stand beside Thalen, her predatory gaze fixed on the human fleet. 180 ships against 20,000 Skrell. Either they're insane, or they know something we don't. The communication console chimed. Lieutenant Venn looked up, his expression caught between hope and disbelief. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through, Thalen commanded. The main view screen shifted, and for the first time in galactic history, a human face appeared before Coalition eyes. The woman wore a dark uniform with unfamiliar insignia. Her features were smooth-skinned, her eyes a striking amber color that seemed to hold both warmth and calculation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. Coalition forces, this is Admiral Zhang Wei of the Terran Expeditionary Force, commanding the Tef's Indomitable. We received your distress call and are here to assist. All Coalition vessels fall back to defensive position behind our formation. We will engage the hostile force. Thalen found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. Admiral Zhang, with respect, the enemy force outnumbers you more than 100 to 1. If you withdraw now, Commander, I appreciate your concern, but we didn't travel 14 light years to run away. Zhang's expression remained calm, almost serene. Your civilians need time to reach safety. We will provide that time. Please comply with the repositioning order. Rix leaned closer to Thalen, her voice low. She's either the most confident officer I've ever encountered, or she's leading her people to slaughter. Before Thalen could respond, the Skrell fleet reacted to the new arrivals. 20,000 ships adjusted their formation, maintaining their encirclement of the Coalition and refugee vessels, while simultaneously orienting weapons toward the human fleet. The Skrell had encountered many species in their expansion across the outer reaches. None had survived initial contact. The human fleet split apart with mechanical precision, forming 18 separate strike groups that accelerated toward different sections of the Skrell formation. Mira's instruments tracked their movement, and her analysis made her question her own sensors. Commander, Those ships are accelerating at 16 gravities. Their crews should be crushed. Even with inertial dampening technology, those speeds should be fatal. Perhaps humans are more durable than they appear, Ven suggested. Though his tone carried doubt, the Skrull opened fire first, launching thousands of plasma bolts and gravity lances toward the approaching human vessels. The Coalition had learned to fear those weapons. A single Skrull cruiser could reduce a Coalition destroyer to molten slag in under a minute. Nothing touched the human ship's dot-point defense systems, activated across the human fleet, creating an interlocking web of protection that seemed impossibly comprehensive. Plasma bolts were intercepted by laser grids that vaporized them mid-flight. Gravity lances were disrupted by counter-graviton pulses. Physical projectiles were shredded by Gaussian cannons that fired thousands of rounds per second. The humans weren't just defending. They were creating a mathematical certainty that nothing could reach them. Then the human fleet fired back. Asterisk. The first weapons Mira identified were kinetic railguns, but that simple classification failed to capture the reality of what she witnessed. Solid projectiles, each weighing several tons, accelerated to 40% of light speed. They crossed the distance to the Skrull fleet in heartbeats. And when they struck, the results were catastrophic. Skrull shields, powerful enough to withstand sustained bombardment from Coalition weapons, simply ceased to exist. The kinetic rounds punched through crystalline hulls like they were tissue paper, transferring their entire momentum in microseconds. Ships exploded from the inside out, their internal structures unable to withstand the energy release. Impossible, Mira breathed, her voice barely audible. Those velocities, that much mass, the energy requirements alone should... Her analysis was interrupted by the second wave of human weapons. Missiles launched from the human ships, thousands of them, each moving with independent guidance systems. They wove through space in complex patterns, avoiding Skrull defensive fire with ease. When they reached their targets, they didn't explode conventionally. Instead, each warhead created a directed energy beam, a fusion-pumped laser that burned with the intensity of a small star. The beams lasted only fractions of a second, but in that time they carved through multiple Skrull vessels, targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Fallon watched in stunned silence as the tactical display showed Skrull ships dying by the hundreds. The human strike groups moved through the enemy formation like scalpels, each action calculated for maximum effect. They weren't fighting. They were executing a mathematical equation where the answer was total enemy annihilation. "Sir, the Skrull are trying to overwhelm the human point defenses," Kess reported, his antennae rigid with tension. "They're concentrating fire from 5,000 vessels on a single human strike group." The Coalition had seen this tactic before. The Skrull would sacrifice ships to overwhelm defenses, creating gaps they could exploit. It was brutal, but effective. It didn't work. The targeted human strike group adjusted their formation, their movements synchronized with inhuman precision. Their defensive fire rate increased, and every single incoming projectile was destroyed before reaching attack range. Fallon realized with growing awe that the humans weren't reacting to Skrull attacks. They were predicting them, positioning their ships to counter threats before they fully materialized. "Their combat systems are reading Skrull tactics in real time," Mira said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're analyzing patterns, predicting responses, and adapting faster than the Skrull can adjust their strategy." Captain Rix's tail lashed behind her, a sign of her agitation. They're not just winning. They're not even being challenged. 3 minutes into the engagement, 5,000 Skrull vessels had been destroyed. At 5 minutes, the number reached 10,000. The Skrull tried to adapt, breaking their formation to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. The humans simply reconfigured their strike groups and continued their systematic destruction. For the first time in 5 years of war, The Skrull Dominion made a decision no coalition force had ever witnessed. They ran. The remaining 10,000 Skrull ships broke formation and fled, engaging their faster-than-light drives in desperate attempts to escape. The human fleet didn't pursue. They held their formation, their dark ships now surrounded by the glowing debris field of their enemies. On the bridge of the Covenant's shield, nobody spoke. They simply stared at their displays, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The Skrull, the unstoppable force that had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed hundreds of fleets, had just been defeated in 7 minutes by a human force 60 times smaller. The communication console chimed again. Admiral Zhang's face reappeared on the view screen, her expression unchanged, as though she had just completed a routine exercise rather than the most one-sided battle in recorded history. Coalition Command, hostile force has been neutralized. Your refugee convoy is clear to proceed to the jump point. We will maintain defensive position until your civilians are safely away. She paused, and for the first time, something resembling a smile touched her features. After that, we should talk. I believe we have much to discuss. Thalen found his voice, though it took effort. Admiral, on behalf of the Coalition, we don't have words. You saved 4 million lives today. That's what decent beings do, Commander. They help when help is needed. Zhang's image flickered slightly. We'll send coordinates for a meeting once your civilians are secure. Terran Expeditionary Force out. The view screen went dark. Thalen looked around his bridge, seeing his own shock and awe reflected in every face. Captain Rix was the first to speak, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and unease. Who are these humans? And what else haven't they told the galaxy? Dr. Myra pulled up the database entry on Earth, her compound eyes scanning the limited information. According to this, they should be discovering basic spaceflight principles right about now. Instead, they have technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. They've been hiding, Thalen said slowly, the realization settling over him like cold water. For almost a century, they've been developing in secret. The question is, why? And what were they preparing for? Lieutenant Venn looked up from his console, his expression troubled. Sir, I've been analyzing the human communication protocols. They're not just fluent in all our languages. They know our military codes, our tactical doctrine, our command structures. They've been listening to us for a very long time. The implications hung heavy in the air. A species that had stayed hidden while developing overwhelming military superiority. A species that had watched the galaxy burn for 5 years before finally revealing themselves. Were they saviors or something else entirely? Maintain defensive formation around the convoy, Thalen ordered, pushing his concerns aside for the moment. And prepare a full report for Coalition Command. Everything we saw, every weapon signature, every tactical movement. They're going to want to know exactly what just happened here. As the bridge crew returned to their duties, Thalen stared at the tactical display where the human fleet maintained their perfect formation. 180 ships that had just changed the course of galactic history. Ships built by a species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. He had a feeling the coming days would bring answers to his questions. He wasn't sure he was ready for those answers, but ready or not, humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The age of human isolation had ended. The question was, what would the age of human involvement bring? The truth revealed the conference room aboard the human flagship. Indomitable was unlike anything Commander Thalen had ever seen. The walls were a dark metallic gray, illuminated by soft white lighting that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The furniture was simple and functional, designed with clean lines and minimal decoration. Everything about the space spoke of efficiency and purpose. Thalen stood near the observation window, watching as Coalition repair crews worked on damaged vessels in the distance. Beside him, Captain Rix examined a display panel on the wall. Her clawed fingers hovering over the interface without touching it. Dr. Mira had positioned herself at the long conference table, her multiple limbs organizing the data tablets and recording devices she had brought for the meeting. They were not alone. 6 other coalition representatives had been invited to this first contact session. Admiral Corvus of the Thalian Concordat, his crystalline form refracting the light into rainbow patterns. General Lex, a massive stone-skinned guardian whose species had fought the Skrell longer than anyone. Commander Yala, an aquatic drift whose environmental suit allowed her to participate in meetings outside her native ocean habitat. And 3 other senior officers representing different coalition numbers. The door opened with a soft hiss, and 3 humans entered. Admiral Zhang Wei led the way, her dark uniform crisp and perfectly maintained. Following her was a tall man with deep brown skin and observant eyes who introduced himself as Captain James Morrison. The third human was a woman with pale features and blonde hair pulled back in a tight braid, introduced as Dr. Sarah Chun, Chief Science Officer of the Expeditionary Force. "Thank you all for coming," Zhang said, gesturing for everyone to take seats around the table. Her voice carried the same calm authority Fallon had heard during the battle. "I know you have many questions. We will answer as many as we can." Fallon settled into a chair designed for his avian physiology, his feathers smoothing slightly as he prepared for what he expected to be a difficult conversation. "Admiral Zhang, let me begin with the most obvious question. How is any of this possible? Our records show Earth as a pre-spaceflight civilization, yet your technology exceeds anything the Coalition has developed in 10,000 years of star travel." Zhang exchanged glances with her fellow officers before responding. "Your records are not wrong, Commander. They are simply incomplete. 97 years ago, when your survey team visited our system, humanity had not yet achieved faster-than-light capability. That much is true. But you achieved it shortly after," Mira interjected, her mandibles clicking with excitement. "The timeline fits. You've been spacefaring for nearly a century." Dr. Chun nodded, her expression serious. "We detected your survey vessel through our radio telescope arrays. We intercepted your scanning signals, your data transmissions, and your subspace wake when you departed. That single visit changed everything for humanity." "How so?" asked Admiral Corvus, his crystalline voice resonating like wind chimes. Captain Morrison leaned forward, his hands folded on the table. "Before that day, humanity existed in isolation. We believed we were alone in the universe. We had our conflicts, our wars, our struggles, but they were always just between ourselves. Then we learned we were not alone, that the galaxy was full of civilizations, all of them capable of traveling between stars while we were still confined to our own solar system. We faced a choice," Zhang continued. "We could announce ourselves immediately, reach out to your coalition, and join the galactic community as a young species learning from our elders. Or we could wait, observe, and prepare ourselves before making contact. You chose to wait," Fallon said quietly. "Why?" Zhang's expression hardened slightly, and for the first time, Fallon saw something like old pain in her eyes. "Because of our history, Commander. Because of what we have done to ourselves." She activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images appeared, showing scenes from human history. Fallon watched cities burning, weapons of terrible power destroying landscapes, and masses of human dead lying in fields and streets. The images were disturbing, made more so by the fact that these were not battles between species, but humans killing other humans. For our entire recorded history, humanity has been at war, Zhang explained. Not with aliens, with ourselves. Nation against nation, ideology against ideology, resource group, against resource group. We have killed each other with every weapon we could invent, from sharpened stones to nuclear fission bombs capable of destroying entire cities. The coalition representatives sat in stunned silence. War between members of the same species was not unknown, but it was rare and usually brief. The idea of it being a constant throughout an entire civilization's development was almost incomprehensible. When we learned about the Galactic community, Dr. Chun said, we had just emerged from what we call the resource wars. Nearly 1 billion humans died over a 20-year period, fighting over water, rare minerals, and habitable land as our population exceeded our planet's sustainable capacity. The wars ended not because we achieved peace, but because we had simply exhausted ourselves. We looked at the stars, Morrison continued, and we asked ourselves a question. What if the galaxy is not as peaceful as your survey data suggested? What if we announce ourselves and encounter a species like the Skrell? What if we make ourselves vulnerable to conquest or slavery or extinction? So you prepared, Rick said, her tone carrying both understanding and unease. For 97 years, you built weapons and warships in secret. We did more than that, Zhang corrected. We rebuilt our entire civilization. We ended the resource wars by developing fusion power and asteroid mining. We unified our governments under a single coalition of nations. We took all the competitive drive that had fueled our conflicts and redirected it toward advancement. Every breakthrough in physics, every innovation in engineering, every advancement in artificial intelligence, we poured it all into becoming capable of defending ourselves. Myra's compound eyes fixed on the human admiral. You assumed the worst-case scenario and prepared for it. Yes, Zhang said simply. We assumed that somewhere in the galaxy there would be a species that would see us as prey or resources or obstacles. We decided we would never be helpless again. General Vex spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. Your weapons. The kinetic systems, the fusion warheads, the point defense networks. These are not defensive technologies. These are weapons designed for overwhelming offense. Dr. Chun nodded. That's correct, General. We learned through our own bitter experience that the best defense is not a stronger shield. It's the ability to eliminate threats before they can strike. Every human warship carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. Not because we want to use such force, but because we never want to face an enemy we cannot defeat. You built yourselves into the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Corvus observed, his crystalline form pulsing with complex light patterns. And then you hid that fact from everyone. We monitored your transmissions, Morrison explained. We learned your languages, studied your cultures, watched your news and entertainment broadcasts. We saw that the coalition species are fundamentally peaceful. You trade, you cooperate, you resolve conflicts through diplomacy whenever possible. You are what we hope to become. But you are not us, Fallon said carefully. You are warriors who learn to cooperate, while we are cooperators learning to fight. Asterisk, an accurate assessment, Zhang agreed. Which brings us to why we finally revealed ourselves. 6 months ago, we detected the Skrell invasion patterns. We watched as they pushed deeper into coalition space. We saw species losing their homeworlds, billions dying, and we faced another choice. She stood and walked to the observation window, looking out at the stars. There was significant debate on Earth. Some argued we should continue hiding, that the Skrell would never reach our system, that we should protect ourselves first. Others argued that we had a moral obligation to help, that watching innocent beings die when we had the power to save them made us complicit in their deaths. You chose to help, Yala said from her environmental suit, her translated voice carrying through the speakers. Why? Zhang turned back to face the assembled officers. Because despite everything we have done to each other, despite all our violence and conflict, humanity has always believed in one fundamental principle. When someone is in danger, you help them. It doesn't matter if they are strangers. It doesn't matter if helping them puts you at risk. You help because that is what decent beings do. So you came to save us, Rick said, though her tone suggested she was still processing the implications. But you also came to protect yourselves. The Skrull will not stop with Coalition territory. Eventually, they would reach Earth, Morrison confirmed. We calculated they would arrive at our borders within 15 years if their expansion continued unchecked. So yes, helping you also helps us. But that doesn't make our offer of assistance less genuine. Thalen felt his feathers settle as understanding crystallized. You revealed yourselves now because it served both purposes. You save lives, and you eliminate a threat before it reaches your territory. And by doing it this way, you enter the galactic community as saviors rather than hidden threats. That is remarkably perceptive, Commander, Zhang said with a slight smile. You understand strategy well. I understand survival, Thalen replied. Your species has been surviving against yourselves for thousands of years. You think several moves ahead because you had to. You prepared for threats that did not yet exist because you learned that being unprepared means being dead. Dr. Chun pulled up new data on the holographic display. We would like to propose a formal military alliance. The Terran Defense Force will commit vessels to the defense of Coalition space and the elimination of the Skrull threat. In exchange, we ask for diplomatic recognition, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs. You want to join the Coalition, Admiral Corvus stated. We want to stop being alone, Zhang corrected. Humanity has been isolated for its entire existence. We fought ourselves because we had no one else to fight, no one else to compete with or cooperate with. We have been watching your civilizations for decades, learning about species that build together instead of tearing each other apart. We want to be part of that. We want to learn how to be better than our history. General Vex shifted his massive form, the sound of grinding stone filling the room. You offer us military protection, but you are also showing us that you could conquer us easily. Every species in this room knows that if humanity decided to take Coalition space by force, we could not stop you. The tension in the room thickened. It was the question everyone had been thinking, but no one had wanted to voice. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming superiority. What was to stop them from using it for conquest? Morrison met the general's gaze steadily. You are absolutely correct. We could attempt conquest. We have the military capability. But then what? We hold your territories through fear and force? We become the very thing we spent a century preparing to defend against? We repeat the mistakes of our own history on a galactic scale? We have been tyrants and conquerors in our own history, Zhang added. We know exactly where that path leads. Endless rebellion, constant conflict, and the eventual collapse of empires built on oppression. We did not unify our species and rebuild our civilization just to become galactic oppressors. Then what do you want? Thalen asked directly. Friends, Dr. Chun said simply. Allies, trade partners. Teachers who can help us understand how to maintain peace instead of just winning wars. You have millennia of experience in cooperation that we lack. We have military capability that you need. It seems like a fair exchange. Yala's translated voice carried a note of curiosity. You said you monitored our transmissions. What did you learn about us? Zhang returned to her seat, her expression softening. We learned that you value life in ways we are still struggling to understand. We watched your entertainment media and saw stories about cooperation, about protecting the weak, about sacrificing for others. We listened to your political debates and heard arguments about ethics and morality that our species rarely prioritized during our conflicts. We observed your response to the Skrull invasion and saw 7 species standing together despite centuries of minor conflicts, choosing to die together rather than abandon each other. You showed us what we could become, Morrison added. A humanity that channels its competitive drive into growth rather than destruction. A civilization that prepares for threats without becoming a threat itself. You have something we desperately need. Hope for a better version of ourselves. Myra clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. And in exchange, you offer us survival. Your military doctrine, your technology, your tactical knowledge. You will teach us how to fight like you fight. If you are willing to learn, Zhang confirmed. The Skrell are not going to stop. We destroyed one fleet, but they control hundreds of systems. This war is far from over. We can help you win it, but you need to adapt. Your current tactics prioritize defense and endurance. You need to learn offensive warfare, striking decisively at critical targets. Thalen looked around the table at his fellow officers. He saw fear in some eyes, hope in others. The humans were offering salvation, but they were also fundamentally altering the balance of power in the galaxy. Once humanity was integrated into the coalition, nothing would ever be the same. We need to consult with our governments, he said finally. This alliance you propose would change everything. But speaking personally, I believe we would be fools to refuse. You saved 4 million lives today. You demonstrated capabilities we desperately need. And despite your terrifying military power, you came to help rather than conquer. We understand, Zhang said, nodding. Take the time you need. But while you deliberate, might I suggest we begin smaller cooperation? Joint tactical exercises, technology sharing sessions, cultural exchange programs. Let our peoples get to know each other before formalizing larger agreements. That seems reasonable, Admiral Corvus agreed, his crystalline form chiming softly. And it would give us time to verify that your intentions match your words. Fair enough, Morrison said with a slight smile. Though I should mention, you will find that humans are generally terrible at hiding their intentions for long. We are not a subtle species. Dr. Chun brought up a new star map on the holographic display. We have intelligence on Skrell staging areas and supply lines. If you are interested, we could begin planning coordinated strikes. Small operations to test our ability to work together. The coalition officers leaned forward, studying the map. Thalen saw opportunity in those marked systems. Targets that had been unreachable before suddenly seemed vulnerable. With human firepower and coalition knowledge of the region, they could begin pushing back for the first time in 5 years. This system here, General X pointed to a red marker. The Skrell have been using it as a command hub. We lost an entire fleet trying to assault it 2 years ago. We could take it, Zhang said confidently, with proper planning and combined forces. Your vessels provide reconnaissance and local knowledge. Our vessels provide strike capability. We hit them before they can organize a defense. When? Rix asked, her predatory nature responding to the possibility of offensive action. 2 weeks, Morrison suggested. That gives us time to integrate our communication systems and run training simulations. Your officers need to understand how we operate. And we need to understand your capabilities and limitations. Thalen felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Real. Tangible hope that this war could actually be won. I will recommend to Coalition Command that we accept your offer of cooperation. I suspect they will agree quickly. In the meantime, Zhang stood, extending her hand in what Thalen had learned was a human gesture of agreement. Welcome to the beginning of a new era. Humanity is no longer alone, and neither are you. Thalen reached out with his wing, carefully clasping the human admiral's hand. Her grip was firm, but not crushing, controlled strength that could have been dangerous, but chose to be gentle dot around the table. Other coalition officers made similar gestures with the human representatives. Myra's mandibles clicked with excitement as she began discussing technology exchanges with Dr. Chun. General Vex and Captain Morrison were already deep in conversation about tactical doctrine. Yala was asking Zhang about human, aquatic environments and whether cultural exchange could include her species. Looking at this scene, Thalen realized he was witnessing history. The moment when humanity stepped from shadow into light. The moment when the galaxy gained its most powerful protector and its most dangerous potential threat. He hoped desperately that the humans meant what they said, that they truly wanted friendship and cooperation rather than dominance. But even if his hopes were misplaced, even if the humans had ulterior motives, right now the coalition needed them. The Skrull would not wait while philosophers debated ethics. "Admiral," Thalen said quietly, drawing Zhang's attention. "One more question, if I may. You said you prepared for the worst-case scenario. What was that scenario in your planning? What were you most afraid of encountering?" Zhang's expression turned somber. "We feared encountering a species like ourselves, Commander. A species that had followed the same violent path we had, but had never chosen to change. We feared meeting beings who saw the galaxy as a resource to exploit and other species as obstacles to eliminate. We prepared to face cosmic-scale versions of humanity's worst impulses. And instead you found the Skrull," Thalen said softly. "Yes, and we found you. Victims who needed help. That, Commander, is the best-case scenario we never dared to hope for. A galaxy worth protecting and people worth protecting it with." As the meeting continued into detailed planning, Thalen allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The humans were terrifying, yes. Their capacity for violence was beyond anything the Coalition had imagined. But they had also chosen mercy over conquest, cooperation over domination. Perhaps that was what made them truly dangerous. Not their weapons, but their choices. The humans had looked at the galaxy's darkness and decided to fight it rather than join it. And now, the Coalition would learn to fight beside them. The age of human isolation had ended. The age of human coalition alliance had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Skrull Dominion would soon learn what it meant to face an enemy that refused to be prey. The galaxy was changing. Thalen just hoped it was changing for the better. Asterisk.